Live everywhere on netrootsradio.com. David Waldman, Kagro, in the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Monday, November 16th, 2020. Time for another week. Time for another show. It's in fact week 200 of The Presidential Apprentice, as Bill notes in his morning tweet, all the way from Portland, Maine, because that's where he is. That's where the tweets are coming from. I guess you could probably set it up differently, but he hasn't bothered to try. And isn't that really the problem? Let's blame it all on him. Why not? Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you, Bill. Thanking my wife for bringing me my what is this thing? Oh yeah, sun hoodie. I don't know what that is exactly, but it's a nice light thing designed to keep me warm that I won't be able to put on until Greg gets here, because then I'll be able to mute the microphone and you won't hear all the fabric rustling. Well, okay. I mean, I could probably do it now and you wouldn't care very much. I shouldn't be talking so much about this. I just noticed that the big problem with the entire Western Hemisphere, Western culture, etc., I guess, has been pointed out by Candace Owens, super genius, who, I don't know, got on her low horse at some point about, I'm not even certain how it happened. I mean, I think she was pointing at a photo spread in, I guess, Vogue magazine. I'm unaware, but apparently a Vogue magazine spread in which somebody who's famous for reasons that will get you in Vogue magazine is a male personage, by all appearances, but wearing some sort of very fancy dress. And, you know, Vogue is a fashion magazine. And the spread, I don't know, I had a quote from him saying it's fun to play around with clothes and fabrics and things, and that's kind of what magazine Vogue is. They play around with clothes and fabric. And this has offended Candace Owens greatly. And you never want that to happen. And so she has decided that this person who has put on clothes that look funny to her is a threat to Western civilization and is in fact the threat to Western civilization. Of course, blah, 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 we're all Marxists. And the feminization of men has ruined Western culture. In the East, apparently, they know this. I'm not exactly certain how and why they haven't done anything fantastic like, I don't know, invent 3-flavored holographic popsicles, flying cars. I'm waiting on the popsicle thing. A vaccine for coronavirus, for instance, might be nice also. I mean, you know, we've been waiting a little bit for that. That also in the news. Anyway, she's decided that Western culture is going to collapse because of the clothing. And so here I am telling you, oh my gosh, I've got a sun hoodie. That sounds like some sort of high fashion thing. It's actually like a very light, you know, hoodie, front zip sweatshirt, just for those days when putting on a regular heavy cotton hoodie is too much, but having nothing is not enough. I guess those days when their sun will be out, you have the sun hoodie. But, you know, I didn't mean to tell you that. I didn't mean to ruin Western culture. Anyway, so as it happens, despite the fact that I have this very light hoodie, which I still haven't put on, I might not even need, but thank you very much for getting it for me. A lot of problems at showtime today, including one that neither the East nor the West has found a way to solve, and that is the computer insisting on updating itself half an hour before the show and telling you it will take 38 minutes to do. You never believe the computer when it tells you that, thankfully, and it ended up taking much less time. I'm glad for that, but is there some way? There's probably a way. A button I can press somewhere that will say, if you're going to update, don't do it in the morning. Wait until the afternoons to do it. But haven't found that one yet, probably because of the guy in the dress. And I blame him, too, to be honest. Anyway, the real news is, what's his name? The Trump guy says he won the election on Twitter, but you're not allowed to say it. Well, he's not. I mean, he can say it, but Twitter puts up a little sign on it that says it didn't really happen that way. But I am lectured daily, reminded daily, you know, and it's a good reminder that, if you're a good person and you want to yell at the president, you should not be retweeting his tweets. You should take a screenshot and use that, and then it won't contribute to his numbers. But I have found along the way over 4 years of people saying that it doesn't seem to make a great deal of difference about anything. But it does have, in this case, the added value of displaying in your photo the little sign on there from Twitter that says, by the way, this isn't true, but we're sending it to you anyway because somehow it's newsworthy for you to know that the president is lying about something major, not something minor. We're okay with that. And I don't know. Twitter has a lot of accounting to do for itself. And I have read an article that said that, by the way, this sort of forbearance by Twitter against I guess you would call it, censoring someone who serves in the role of President of the United States, is planned and likely to end with the Biden era. They will, I don't know, I don't expect Joe Biden to be tweeting incitements to violence. So that's good, and that may end it in the Biden era. It might not be Twitter that does it, but apparently they know they need some sort of new approach to things, but they're sort of grandfathering in Grandpa Trump and not going to grandfather in Grandpa Biden somehow. I'm not really sure why that is the case, but I do expect a lot less lying and incitement to violence. It's been a wild weekend. There was a big violence festival in Washington, D.C. Mostly came to nothing, so we can round up other news. It's actually important, like the vaccines and what people are feeling about why Democrats are going to, I don't know, fail at everything or something until the next election. Greg's got all that news. Probably not even anything about the failing. That's good. What's on tap?
No, I have that too.
Oh, okay. So it's good to keep up with.
That's like Dems in disarray. You can always find one of those.
Yeah, right. And there are plenty of those. There was one at the end of last week that was kind of absurd. I'll see if I can remember it while you're doing your thing.
Well, the vaccine news is the big news, of course.
Yes, there are two.
But there are now two.
Carmine said one
vaccine.
Wait,
there is another.
Okay.
That's right. What Yoda said.
Yes.
He's right.
I went
never argue with Yoda. So part of what I want to do is I want to start with some bookmark tweets I have here.
Okay, yeah.
Just to put this a little bit in perspective. This one is from
what is it?
ER nurse in South Dakota.
Oh yes, very popular share.
And North Dakota, of course, is having the biggest problem. South Dakota next.
Yes.
And after that, there's Montana.
Right.
There's Iowa, Wyoming, Wisconsin, Minnesota. They're all having issues.
Right. They're all states.
But top three are North Dakota, South Dakota, and Iowa.
Yeah.
This nurse, Jody Doring, writes, I have a night off in the hospitals. I'm on my couch with my dog. I can't help but think of the COVID patients the last few days. The ones that stick out are those who still don't believe the virus is real.
Yeah.
The ones who scream at you for a magic medicine and that Joe Biden is going to ruin the USA, all while gasping for breath on 100% Vapotherm. That's a heated nasal cannula oxygen delivery system for people who are having difficulty breathing. That's short of intubation and putting you on a ventilator, but more than just hanging out with an oxygen mask on. Yeah. They tell you there must be another reason they're sick. They call you names and ask why you have to wear all that stuff because they don't have COVID because it's not real.
Right,
yes,
sure.
This really happens. And I can't stop thinking about it. The people really think this isn't going to happen to them, and then they stop yelling at you when they get intubated. It's like a fucking horror movie that never ends. That's what she said. There's no credits that roll. You just go back and do it all over again, which is what I will do for the next 3 nights. But tonight, it's me and Cliff, my dog.
The dog, okay.
Oreo ice cream. And how ironic I have on my home hoodie, the South Dakota I love seems far away right now. And, that's what the reality is for the health workers who are going through this right now.
Thanks, Jody.
Here's another one. This is text I just received, says June Diane Raphael, from my best friend, a pulmonary and critical care doctor, asking how she's doing. And the doc writes, tomorrow will be my 10th day working straight. We're completely surging. I'm carrying more and sicker patients than ever in my career. They almost all have COVID. I expect at least half of them to die, but probably not for an average of 1 to 3 weeks. And I have to call their families and update them daily. I sobbed on the phone with one mom who I have to update about her daughter who will likely die. We're overflowing our units. We're short-staffed. We're physically, emotionally, and mentally exhausted. People aren't wearing masks. They're having Sunday family dinners. They're going to church. They're planning for Thanksgiving. And there's such a disconnect between the hospital and the surrounding communities. I don't leave the hospital to bells, whistles, and clanging pots and pans. I drive home stunned through a college town with lines out the door for the local bars. People complain about the personal freedoms being limited and the mental effects of social distancing and wearing a mask, but give no respect to others' right to live and no thought to the mental effects of accidentally infecting and killing grandma or the trauma they're imposing on their healthcare workers. Just to give you an idea of how things are going from the healthcare workers' point of view. That puts the vaccine, of course, in stark contrast, and we will get to that. But the scenario I'm trying to set up here is that for a lot of Americans, they seem to have given up on the idea of social distancing and masks, at least in the middle of the country, in places like North Dakota and South Dakota. And you have governors who simply are not supporting any kind of public health measures at all. So the idea that American industry and science can come up with vaccines in 9 months, which is really astounding, and a new way of doing it, which we'll talk about as well. But people won't do what they need to do in terms of getting the vaccine, accepting it, doing the social distancing, wearing the mask, and all of that, as part and parcel of, the freedom-loving United States.
Yeah.
Now, we do have, in the face of this absolute forced reality, places like North Dakota governor finally saying, yeah, maybe wearing a mask is a good idea after North Dakota has the worst numbers in the country per capita.
Yes, worst word in the world, really, as far as the jurisdiction goes, but they're not their own country.
Again, Ed Young from The Atlantic reminds us there's about a 12-day lag between seeing the cases spike and the hospitalization spike, and then another couple of weeks after that before you die.
Yeah.
So cases spiking now means in 2 weeks you're going to see terrible hospitalizations, and the hospitals are already overrun.
They are.
And that means you can't get in with anything. And so you're going to wind up dying at home. We've seen that. We saw it in New York. It's not exaggeration. It's not pandemic porn. It's, the reality of what people are looking at, and it's going to be worse in 2 weeks than it is right now. That being the case, it is so important to have somebody at the head of the federal government pushing the idea that social distancing and simple public health measures are important and they need to be instituted. And, of course, we have the opposite. We have Trump refusing to cooperate with the transition. And funny, he won't let Tony Fauci meet with the Biden team, but the Biden team can meet with the vaccine manufacturers directly. They don't need the federal government as a go-between there.
Yeah, that's helpful.
So that's helpful in terms of planning the distribution issues that are going to come up. And at the same time, we have the denialists governors. The South Dakota government, Governor Kristi Noem is one of the worst in the country.
Yeah.
Ron DeSantis in Florida, they absolutely refuse to do what's right. DeSantis likes to make up numbers. Noem likes to pretend there's no problem. Even Greg Abbott in Texas and Brian Kemp in Georgia will bend to the reality of what's happening in their states.
Yes. Well,
it even happens in
Brian
Mississippi.
Kemp.
But not necessarily Florida and South Dakota. And so the disconnect there is just astounding. And one of the big things you'd think is, okay, well, these are elected officials, and so by election time, they would have to have some consequences. It didn't quite work out that way for reasons that are pretty complicated and we're still trying to figure out. But part of the reason is that it's just so much more seductive to listen to the idea that maybe we don't have to, than you have to take medicine, maybe you do. And so the public just didn't want to in places like South Dakota. They do want to in places like Massachusetts and Connecticut and New York. And so, that's part of it. Part of it is that the U.S. still has their priorities screwed up. Europe is closing restaurants and opening the schools. We're closing the schools and opening the restaurants. It's exactly the wrong approach. And that's one of the reasons why we're doing so much worse than they are. Now, to close the restaurants and other small businesses, to get people to stay home, you got to pay them.
Right.
Europe does that. We don't. That's another thing that we screwed up. So it's all part and parcel. They have to go together. And I think, there's certainly a lot of resentment about Washington not passing enough relief. But the blame game in terms of who that gets, fingers pointed at is part of the reason why the election turned out the way it did. more people blame Trump and the Republicans, which is why the Democrats won, but not enough people blame Trump and the Republicans, which is why the Republicans did better than we wanted to in the House and Senate races.
Yep.
And so it's all tied together. Bill Scher points out, Democrats didn't really do that badly. My latest for Real Clear News explores the question, who deserves blame for Democrats' lost House seats? First, let's challenge the premise much blame is deserved. It's unusual to lose House seats in a year you win the presidential election, but it's not unusual to give back seats soon after making double-digit gains, as Democrats did in 2018. In 2018, we won a lot of blue congressmen in red districts.
Yes.
Because Trump wasn't on the menu, and so they didn't show up. But they did in 20, and so those districts were won back. What does that mean? It's complicated. Yes. It doesn't mean any one thing. It doesn't mean that Democrats are too progressive or that Republicans are all racist. There's other things that suggest Republicans are all authoritarian and plenty racist. But, it's a complicated mix of everything, including the pandemic. And when you have people who are being told by Fox News that it's really not that bad and people are lying to you about how bad it is, it takes a major event like your own hospital collapsing or your own family dying off to break through that. It's unfortunate, but that's the reality.
Yes, and then you get to go to a diner and get interviewed about it.
Where everybody gets sick,
Yes.
From that interview, because the diner should have been open.
The
ability of the press to start covering Biden voters, is there. So we'll see what happens with that as time goes on.
We should ramp that ability up.
Real fast.
Working.
And a lot of this stuff that Trump says doesn't really need to be covered, but the fact that he refuses to play with the transition is the story, the only story, not whether he won the election or not, that's over. But his not playing with the transition is the big story. And that's why all of that pandemic news plays into it. That puts enormous pressure on Republicans to start playing ball, and that's why you have the North Dakota governor finally declaring a mask mandate. So yes, that pressure matters, and yes, it can change things. Not fast enough, obviously. Republicans are who they are. They see this as a route to power, and they're perfectly willing to jettison Trump and go with the populist thing because they see that it wins them votes. And it does. They're right about that, unfortunately, because it's a very seductive thing. It will not be forever. It won't last forever. It needs to be fought. We will fight it, but nobody should have any illusions about how easy it's going to be. And that's why when you get vaccine news, it sort of changes things because you can say, look, I know that masks are uncomfortable and I know that you don't like wearing them. You said it was not real, but it is real, and your hospital's collapsing. But there is light at the end of the tunnel. By March or April, we ought to have vaccine for, a lot of people. We can work on the distribution problems even better if you let us into the transition now. There should be vaccine by the end of this year. It'll work better if you let us into the transition now. If you want to give Trump credit for the vaccine, that's great. That means that the half of the country that voted for him might actually accept taking it.
Hey.
So as annoying as it is to have Trump self-congratulate, I'm okay with that so long as it makes his people say, okay, well, it's a Trump vaccine, so I'm perfectly happy. It sucks, but, take it.
Okay.
Democrats have to learn how to take the win. We never do. We're much better at dealing with losses. We don't know how to win.
Yeah, well, that's an unusual situation sometimes, we feel like, but it's going to be interesting.
For Democrats.
Interesting
watching. We win by as much as we thought we were going to. Oh, my God, we won, but we won.
Yes. Well, we've done this before. We won. We didn't win by as much as we thought we were going to. Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, we did, except it took us 2 weeks to figure it out. Oh, so bad, Well,
yeah, so we just assumed that we didn't because, that's what we do. Get over that. We won.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll try and accept that.
Well, we've accepted it already,
and then I'll try harder.
So now it's like, okay, since you lost, and it's just great to see Twitter, I won the election, says Trump in capital letters and Twitter ads. Official sources say that's not true.
Yes, right. Well, it isn't.
But, think of it. The president of the United States is not an official source.
Yeah, right. That's true. I do wonder, as most people do wonder, what's the value of if you have to tag literally every single one of his tweets, when are you going to do something about it? But yeah, that's clearly not happening. They value it too highly.
Well, the internet can fact check me, but I think it was Jim Acosta from CNN who said, look, he's still the president and we have to cover what he says and what he tweets. But after he's not president, we don't have to pay attention to this loudmouth idiot.
Well, it's true. Practice that now.
And it wasn't that far off from what I remember. That's not a direct quote. That's a remembered quote. But he essentially said that.
All right. I'll buy that. I mean, I think it's probably true. And you could practice a little now if you want.
Yeah, absolutely everything he says does not have to be covered.
Yeah. I mean, very much of it has already been said and covered anyway.
Okay, I found the quote. He said, quote, Trump is still the president, so we still have to pay attention to his tweets, but after January 20th, he's just another crackpot on the internet.
Okay. Yeah, well, that's how he won. But okay. Whatever. We'll see. I think now at least there's fatigue. So we got that going for us.
This vaccine.
Which is nice.
A reminder about what the vaccine is. It's an mRNA vaccine. That means that you have a virus, and the virus is shaped like a little ball, according to all the pictures, with little spikes on it. And the spiky part helps the virus interact with the membrane of your cells to get into the cells, so it could use its own stealing your protein mechanism to make more virus and hijack the cell and so forth. So that's what the spiky protein does. And in a traditional vaccine, you try to make antibodies against the spike so that you could fight off the virus.
All right.
But with an mRNA vaccine, you don't have the virus, so you can't get sick from it. You don't have a piece of the virus exactly. You're sending the messenger RNA into your body so that you make the viral spike, and then antibodies will fight it off.
All right.
And it's a novel way of approaching this, and it appears to work. Moderna announced today 94% success in preventing serious illness. The Pfizer vaccine works similarly also in mRNA, but there's big differences.
Oh.
Okay. So the Moderna vaccine apparently is more stable at room temperature, or at least the refrigerated temperatures, like in your own refrigerator. So you don't have to have the minus 70 degree deal quite as badly. In other words, you can have a central place for that, but then distribute it to places that just have refrigerators, and you have a month to get it off the shelf and give it. And that'll make distribution a whole lot easier when that happens.
Yes,
that's good. Excellent news.
Better.
And now you have two vaccines, and there's probably going to be more because others that are not mRNA vaccines are also, in the works. But at least we have those two, and we should have the ability to make 20 million or so doses by the end of the year and 500 million by the middle of 2021. And so you can see light at the end of what is a very toxic, poison-filled tunnel. If you get to the end of the tunnel, there's light at the end of the tunnel.
Yes.
And so we have to work to get to the end of the tunnel. And that's the purpose. With that light at the end of the tunnel being able to be visualized, you can say, okay, look, you do have to wear your mask. You can't go to Thanksgiving. Areas like North Dakota might, in fact, have to shut down. Shut down meaning not lock down in your house, but, do sensible things. And there's an endpoint to it. And the endpoint is to point the end of the needle that's going to get you vaccinated.
Well, all right.
So there are things that you can do, and it's not forever. You just have to pay people to be able to survive because that's the reason they didn't want to do it.
Right. Hey.
But now that you know that, and now that you know what that scenario is, that's what you can argue about in Washington. Well, how much is enough? Not the concept, but the amounts. And you can fight with Republicans and compromise on that if that, in fact, turns out to be what the fight is.
Okay. Well, yes, I'm looking forward to making our way through this alligator-filled toxic tunnel.
Yeah, pretty much. Now, this is two shots. So the Moderna, I think it had shot one on day 1 and shot 2 on day 29. So it'll be 2 shots 1 month apart. That's not unusual. For kids who have their very first flu shot, that's the way you do it.
Familiar.
If you're under 8 years old. And so, we're familiar with the mechanism of how that has to happen. And some people don't like shots, and some people can't get shots, and some people are immunocompromised. So it's not for absolutely 100% everybody. But the idea is that you immunize enough people and things will work. And this seems to work, pretty well, way better than a flu vaccine, as high as maybe a measles vaccine. The things we don't know are these vaccines going to prevent infection? We don't know that. It seems to prevent serious disease. That's huge. But we don't know whether it stops you from being infected altogether.
Yeah.
Right? And we also don't know how long the immunity lasts. Is this 2 shots now and then 1 shot every year for a while? That could be.
Right.
That's what we do with flu. Again, with the little kids, they get their 2 shots first and then 1 shot every year thereafter. So there's a mechanism for that. There's a way that vaccines are given that's not unusual. And will the non-mRNA vaccines come in the market? And how do they compare in terms of long-term immunization and protection? How does it compare in terms of preventing illness? Maybe this is the short term. There was a Salk vaccine before there was a Sabin vaccine for polio. So there's a lot of different ways, you can get things done fast, and then you can look at it and decide how you want to do things longer in the future. But that's all down the road. It's just that, again, that's all part of that light at the end of the tunnel. So that's the news that we got today. And, of course, Twitter reacted in the way it normally reacts. Oh, my gosh, I tried to buy stock in this company, but, the line was tied up by my senators.
Yes. Well,
and, that's ridiculous. That's a stupid thing to say. Your senators bought this last week.
They did do that. That's true. And, of course, by the time I always learn that by the time you find out, whoever you are,
but there's a runoff in Georgia with 2 senators who did this.
That's true.
It's going to be a campaign issue.
Right. You should send them back home to swim in their piles of money like Scrooge McDuck or the Daffy Duck. Which duck swam in the piles of money? I think it's Daffy swam in it.
Political malpractice if you don't make that central to the campaign.
All right. That's absolutely true. And they've got the right people to do it. Cross your fingers. Hope it works. We'll be right back. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Or read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Greg Dworkin's still with us. I think we're done for the unless there's anything else that popped up.
There's always stuff. Joe Wiesenthal, the stalwart from Bloomberg, tweets this morning, the explosion of virus cases in the U.S. right now helped Pfizer and Moderna collect their much data faster than they had expected. Collect their placebo data. What it says here is in vaccine trials, a certain number of volunteers, a percentage whom get a placebo, have to get infected in order to determine if the vaccine works. It's easier to accomplish with the pandemic in the U.S. surging. The U.S. has recorded more than 100,000 new infections every day since November 5th, according to Johns Hopkins, and the same explosion of COVID cases that helped Pfizer get results for its vaccine trial helped speed along Moderna's trial as well. Wonderful. Moderna on November 11th said the study had accumulated more than 53 infections, allowing a preliminary analysis to begin. Yes. Infections were accumulating so fast in the trial that Moderna's analysis ended up being based on 95 cases. The rate cases are piling up. Moderna should get the final 151 cases by the end of the month, allowing it to complete final analysis and file for emergency use authorization. So the reason that you have to wait for them to do the emergency use authorization, the EUA, is you need enough cases. But at the rate we're going, they'll be able to have that by the end of November. So if you want to thank Trump for the vaccine, this is where he really contributed.
Yes, thank you for making it so easy to get COVID as a placebo trial participant. It happened a lot faster. I saw that when Trump and his friends were complaining about the timing of Pfizer's announcement, that they accused them of strategically withholding their announcement until after the election in order to damage Trump somehow, even though the 250,000 deaths didn't do it, I guess. And, they pointed out, we didn't expect to make this announcement anytime near the election at all. We thought it was going to take a lot longer. So we actually announced sooner than we thought we were going to because Trump has made so many of us sick and there's so much community spread. We finished our trial faster than we thought we were going to.
Right.
So there you go. He also claims, by the way, Trump, just to be clear, Ivanka says her dad invented the Moderna one. So there you go.
Okay, well, that's good to know.
Yeah.
So let's put some of this in perspective in kind of a different way. This is Axios, and we're talking mostly about the pandemic and coronavirus and the vaccine because that's like the big story today. This is from Axios.
Just today. Yeah.
The coronavirus is now a rural threat. New COVID-19 cases in the past week by U.S. county urban-rural classification. The smallest number are in the large central metros, if you're talking about per 100,000 people.
Interesting.
And the largest are in non-metro, less than 10,000. Non-metro, 10,000 to 49,000. Small metro, in other words, the smaller cities and the rural areas are having the biggest problem, according to Axios.
Yeah, all right. Well, I think that's your fault. Not you.
Yeah.
Them. Let's see. Oh,
Well,
you're sending me a picture. What is this?
Oh, it's a picture without the labels.
Yeah,
so let me
look
give
at
you the
that.
story with the labels.
But the graph is fantastic. It's bars.
It's orange. It's very
Looks
pretty.
nice.
So there's the whole thing.
There we go.
Missing from state plans to distribute the coronavirus vaccine, according to the New York Times. The government has sent billions to drug companies, but a tiny fraction of that to localities for training, record keeping, and other costs for vaccinating citizens. Again, it's unlikely this is going to happen directly from your pharmacies. This is purchased vaccine, so pharmacies can't sell to you stuff that's already been purchased. So how this is done may be through public health agencies, visiting nurse, your doctor's office. If it turns out it's the Moderna version that can be kept in the refrigerator. It's not clear how it's going to happen yet.
Otherwise,
at
you
all.
have to go to the
But what is clear is that the state governments are going to need money from the feds. I'm sorry, Mitch McConnell, but they are. In order to help do this properly, there'll probably be drive-through vaccine stations set up in parking lots in the middle of winter. That's the most efficient way to do it. And we've practiced that since 2007-8. So, we know how to do that. But that's, certainly a large part of the issue.
Yeah, you can buy stuff in snow plows.
Now, there are people who are continuing to fight reality here and making things worse. In Michigan, where the virus is spiking, the governor has taken some smart steps.
Michigan. Yeah, that's a good governor, right? They're good at this.
Whitmer, in order to help, it's up to governors to slow the spread, says the Wall Street Journal. States should work together to close bars and nightclubs or risk expensive lockdowns later. And, of course, people don't want their bars closed.
Right, for some reason.
But if you don't close the bars, grandma's going to die.
Yeah. And she doesn't even go
by
to
Scott
the bar.
Gottlieb about how you need coordinated state action to address COVID spread. So Whitmer's trying to do this. Scott Atlas, who is the herd immunity advisor for Trump, who's taken over from Fauci and Birx, here's what Whitmer's up to, and tweets, "The only way to stop this is if people rise up, you get what you accept. Freedom matters and step up are the hashtags."
All right.
And then says, "Wait a minute, why are you all yelling at me on Twitter? I never was talking about violence. People vote, people protest. I never would endorse or incite violence, never." And Ashish Jha, who is the dean at the Brown School of Public Health, says, "Look, Scott Atlas from Hoover, you were not telling people to vote when you said they should rise up against her. She's not up for election. And given the death threat she's faced, this is particularly irresponsible. He's supposedly a physician, this Atlas guy, and a disgrace to our profession." Many other docs wrote in and basically said the same thing. And Josh Marshall points out on the SW Atlas Hoover front, that's his moniker on Twitter, SW Atlas Hoover.
Yeah, they should make him take the Hoover.
Fascinating story to be told that Stanford, and particularly the Hoover Institute, has been a hotspot of COVID misinformation from basically the beginning of the pandemic. It's not just Atlas.
Yeah.
And he's got a whole thread about that, which I'm
It's a very interesting thread.
Remember, those early and largely discredited antibody studies out of Santa Clara and LA counties, folks at Hoover, there were real questions of ethics violations on this one, not just shoddy work. And then there's the pompously entitled Great Barrington Declaration, basically a briefer letting everybody get sick and getting herd immunity against Stanford Hoover. Most of the folks, like Atlas, are doctors but have no expertise in epidemics or even infectious disease. But John Ioannidis, a legitimate experts on epidemics, has basically been pushing COVID denialism since the beginning, also at Stanford Hoover.
That's not good.
So for true hackdown, there's Richard Epstein, a law and economics hack at Hoover. He was the one who had much cited article predicting 500 deaths for the entire epidemic.
Torts book or something. Okay, yeah.
One of his many theories was the virus would quickly weaken because that's what nonsensical theories developed in the law and economics bubble world told him.
Is that right? Sorry
and
about that.
The list goes on. Most of the people who have fancy titles and degrees and have been either constantly wrong about COVID or often peddling misinformation are associated with Stanford. So if I'm going to be an anti-elitist,
sure, why not?
then I think that, I would pick the Hoover Institute to be anti-elitist about.
Yeah, I mean, that's not a bad place to start. Stanford, an institution in general, you're going to want to be anti-elitist about them.
Right here, this is Michael Levitt, Stanford professor of biophysics, who said on July 25th, U.S. COVID-19 will be done in 4 weeks with a total reported death below 170,000. How will we know it's over? Like Europe, when all-cause excess deaths are at normal levels.
Isn't that amazing?
So, you never take any flack for being wrong.
I see.
But they're all out of Stanford. It's amazing.
It is. I didn't realize he was from Stanford, too. And that pointed out, by the way, by our own Karen, our own the best Karen we have. You see in the thread here, is this where you picked it up from Josh's thread, SF? Is that, at any rate, if not, I noticed that she had retweeted that, and she, too, a fellow listener to the show, so sharp eyes and picking up on Michael Levitt, Karen.
Yeah, so that's pretty good. So, I think that the ramifications here, both at state level and at national level, are quite real, and I just thought that all of that was well worth highlighting.
Yeah, I just
the opposite effect, the opposite approach is my friend and historian Dr. Howard Markel, who writes, Michiganders can unite to fight the pandemic. We've done it before, and goes into what happened in 1918 and how everybody banded together to do this. So we've been there, we've done that. It's not like it's never happened. But, if you want to distort the message and make it about freedom,
I do,
and our ability to not wear masks but carry guns, because that's what America is, that's how you get where we are.
Yes.
And, if you want to have super spreader events, there's going to be consequences to it.
Yeah, I don't know how that didn't sink in, and it's too bad. I mean, it's a tricky virus and all, but we're 10 months into this. You now know that you can have an event. If you don't know anybody who died the week after the event, that doesn't mean the event was safe. It just isn't like that.
Right. So I'm going to give you, again, the relationship between the pandemic and politics. You'd like to separate it. You'd like to have vaccines never politicized. That would be the goal. That would be the ideal. And for liberals and progressives and Democrats, it means sucking it up if Trump wants to take credit for the vaccine, because if that gets people vaccinated, that's just what you do. Mm-hmm. It sucks. Get over it. Right. On the other hand,
working on that. Yeah.
Trying to make this into a masks are for Democrats and guns are for Republicans is like really, really bad. And that's how you get cockamamie, games about how we're going to kidnap Gretchen Whitmer stuff going on. And so, Republicans are obligated now, they always were, to make sure that there is a transition, that we can start working on this vaccine. It's real. It's not just imaginary. And they need to be highlighted for refusing to do that when, in fact, that happens.
Yeah.
We need to highlight when they refuse to acknowledge Trump has lost. We need to highlight when they refuse to cooperate with getting pandemic stuff done. And that's a messaging issue on the part of Democrats. And it politicizes it, so you want them to go first and actually do the thing you're criticizing them for, not criticize them in advance. Because if you criticize it in advance, you're politicizing it. And if they do it and then you call them out, you're not. So, it's just the way it has to work. And that means that Democrats have to be a little patient, and they also have to, be willing to give a little credit.
Okay.
That's what bipartisan
Very
means.
small.
You let Trump take credit for the vaccine while he walks out the door. I can't think of anything more bipartisan than that.
I guess that's something. Sir, the credit we've actually had packed up and is waiting
The
for you
credit's
outside.
in your car. You have to go to your car to get it. You have to leave the White House. It's in the back seat.
It's in the trunk.
You go in the back seat, and, your driver will take you to where the credit is.
That might work.
Wait, this is a credit bureau. I said, yeah, it's right next to the Four Seasons landscaping.
It's all here. And,
But,
he's not
it's
used to
all
getting
the credit is right here. It says it right here on the sign. It says Credit Bureau.
Yeah, give it a shot. That
Don't
might
get
work.
your credit.
Ivanka already
Meantime,
thinks it's
while
true.
you're gone, we changed the locks.
I was wondering whether they were going to do that while he was out at the golf course, but I guess it's still premature, and he's supposed to be allowed back in for another couple weeks.
Fortunately, yes. January 20th. Everybody will sleep better on January 20th.
Yeah. Well, we
Anyway,
hope so.
that's
Yeah.
my summary for
All
the
right.
weekend, as complicated as it is.
Okay, we're up to speed on that. Keeping it for the ferret nasal spray fans out there, we are keeping a close eye on that. There was a news story over the weekend that there's a development of some sort of like a 24-hour COVID blocking nasal spray out there. But so that's the good news. The bad news is so far it only works on ferrets. But they're trying to figure.
The good news is you're a ferret.
Right. And if you are,
Not you, but you. You know who I'm talking
yes, welcome to the show. We're okay with that, and we're working on getting you the right to vote as well. So all you have to do is just hang on through this COVID winter with your nasal spray. Which
Right.
doesn't need to be
Picking up on
refrigerated.
last week, here's two political stories I think are worth thinking about. Maybe we'll hit them more on Wednesday.
All right. Set us
This one is from the Washington Post. Biden won places that are thriving, Trump ones that are hurting. In a trend that's been unfolding since 2000, Democrats continue to gain votes in prosperous, highly educated urban areas, and Republicans are gaining in small cities and rural communities.
Yeah,
Is it
where
an
the
education divide?
Not so
Is
much.
it a racial divide? The answer is yes, of course. Race has a lot to do with it. But definite, and Ron Brownstein pointed this out long ago, the non-college versus the college. Everybody's used to that distinction now between, groups that voted for one side or the other side. And counties where voters feel better off today than 4 years ago swung toward Biden, said James Chung, co-founder of StratoDem Analytics, which studies local economic trends. Counties that declined over the last 4 years are more likely to shift even more to Trump, to be sure, because you always have to be sure
I
article.
thought that was only
right?
for before the election.
To be sure, Chung found that, as exit polls have shown, education and race most strongly explain voting patterns, but they're followed closely by a county's economic performance. The economy often decides elections, but the surprise in this case was that good economic performance didn't appear to favor the incumbent.
Okay.
That's
why
because,
not?
college-educated people understood what's going on here. On the other hand, having grown up in Yonkers, New York, Brooklyn, and in the working place of Brooklyn, and I come from a blue-collar family, and my friends in grade school were basically, all ethnic all the time. It was very clear which in-group and out-group you belonged. I mean, this is second nature to me. I totally get this. If you're a working guy who didn't go to college, you have a very different view of the world. If you're a plumber, electrician, small business, own a restaurant, you're doing okay, and now the vaccine comes along, the pandemic comes along, the virus comes along, and you got to close your business or at least temporarily put it on hold. You might lose the business. Right. And if you don't get support from the government, you're going to lose your meal ticket.
Yeah.
So you're going to blame people who tell you to shut down.
Yes, I would think. I mean,
and so that's how that's how the pandemic didn't play like we thought. Yeah, conditions are terrible, but I'd rather open up and try to fight my way through it. And you're not letting me. I'm blaming you.
Yeah.
And that's real, and we have to keep that in mind. Of course, Pelosi wanted to put a big, giant stimulus package there to help folks like that. That was blocked by Mitch McConnell. We, media, everybody else did a terrible job in putting the finger on Mitch for blocking all that stuff. You know, people who follow politics knew it, but like your regular Joe the Plumber didn't. And so didn't blame Republicans for it.
Plumber again.
And but that's essentially what happened with this.
Yes.
So education, college, non-college, that has a big to do with how you see all of this. So by the way, now these forgive your college loans idea comes up. Mm-hmm. Who does that help politically?
The other people.
Helps Democrats, but not Republicans.
Well, yeah. Oh, well, people who tend to become Democrats because
the
they
ones
went
we're
out and got
talking
an
about here.
education,
It helps the college class, the college age, the college plus voters, but the non-college voters are going to say, "I got all these other problems, and you're forgiving your own. I don't like this. Next election, I'm taking it out on you. I'm just telling you."
They may do that. Of course, you could say, "What do you got that needs forgiving?" Speak
Messaging.
up.
Right? Or you should also say exactly what do you got that needs forgiving. It isn't just college forgiveness. There's also other things that help you that we have to do.
I mean, did you borrow for your certification? I can help you.
Well, do you need help right now keeping your business open?
Yeah. Or okay.
You got to be
money
very
for everybody.
practical about this. And to ignore it is bad. It doesn't mean that forgiving college loans is bad, but it can't be done in a vacuum. It can't be done, okay, and then we'll get to you later.
Yeah.
They look at that and say, well, that's what you said about NAFTA. That's why we voted for Republicans. This stuff is real.
Yeah, although
and you
they
can't
do
ignore
that to us all the time. Well, we want a smaller relief package first, and then we'll get to your priorities after. Oh, we didn't. Hey, we never get to Democratic priorities. That's weird. But yeah, that's not going to do anything for Plumber Guy to acknowledge that. That sounds bad, but I need help. But you know,
again, what occurred in 2020 from this article appears to be part of a larger shift in U.S. politics and economics that's been in motion since the turn of the century. In almost every election since 2000, Democrats increased their share of votes in urban areas that are densely populated and prosperous, while Republicans have increasingly become the dominant party for voters in smaller cities and rural areas. The transformation has been swift and stark. In 2020, Biden won 490 counties that account for 70% of the U.S. economy, while Trump won 2,534 counties amounting to just shy of 30% of the economy. For Democrats, it was a notable increase in 2016 when Hillary Clinton won 64%. So the better off you do, the more you're going to vote Democrat. That's fine, but given the way that the Electoral College works, not fine if you want to govern.
Yes, that's true.
Right? I mean, it's an ideal. I love the idea that Blue America is diverse, college educated, invested in professional and tech businesses, but it also should include blue collar people. It's got to include unions. Another story about how unions see Joe Biden as a blue collar guy, one of their own. Democrats have to build on that. That was once our base. Could be again.
All right.
But the ethnic, racist part of it was always there. I grew up with it. I can attest to it. And so you're going to have to deal with that as well. Basically, what you have to do is say the economics outweigh the racism. And so you should vote for us.
All right.
And so that, that's kind of the message that needs to be done going forward. You can't ignore the racism part, but you can't directly fight it because you're not going to get anywhere.
Yes, possibly true. Here's a suggestion from one of our listeners, Mars Farmer 75, who unsurprisingly has this suggestion, I guess, now that you've recognized him as Mars Farmer. But yeah, you could hang out the possibility of forgiving farm loans.
Yes. It's a wonderful idea. In fact, important. So. As a matter of fact, one of the reasons why Iowa and other farmers,
the rug out from under
stayed loyal to Trump is Trump funneled billions of dollars to them.
Yeah. They seem to have enjoyed that. And another way of doing that would be forgiving farm loans. There are other loans, or I guess the old Republican idea of block granting everything. Just grant everybody a giant chunk of cash and either use it to pay off your loan.
Well, the thing about the farms that we have to remember, and it's not that long ago, I'm old enough to remember Willie Nelson and Farm Aid, but that was for family farms. The way the Trump administration does it is they funnel all the money to the, Brazilian Batista brothers and JBS and the other people who own
Chinese pork farmers.
the beef production, even though the farmers own the land. And so if it's all going to corporate, Purdue and JBS and such, then the family farms aren't really seeing it, or if they are, they're seeing it indirectly.
Yeah.
And that's, a lot of graft, a lot of cheating, a lot of stealing. And so, there has to be better ways to do it than the way Trump did it. But the concept of getting money to farmers is a good one.
Yeah.
The practical aspects of how they did it was awful.
Plumbers will say, I am also not a farmer, as well as not being college educated.
Well, you got to funnel,
it's okay. Funnel
money
to
to
other
plumbers.
People, ways to do it. Yeah, true.
If your business is threatened. If your business isn't threatened, you don't necessarily need the money.
Yeah. Well, so what? Give me anyway.
I mean, if you're a local guy who makes, let's say, I don't know, masks.
Yes, right.
You may not need the extra stimulus fund at this particular point in time.
Maybe, unless you bought
you may
took out a
need
loan
to
for your
increase
machines.
production. That's a different issue. But to keep your business open, that isn't necessarily what you need. So, smarter ways of doing investments and stimulus is certainly called for. And if your whole shtick is, I'm sick of smart people, I don't want educated people making these decisions, then, that's a tough one. But let's just make sure that, okay, you may not want smart people doing it. Let's have some dumb people do the smart stuff. And it's still going to help you, and that's what you need to recognize. Maybe that's the message. I don't know.
Well, there are many to work on. We'll have to see if we can refine it. But yeah, you should be looking for ways to spread that benefit. I mean, even a large part of the Democratic coalition.
I think that every economist and banker and Treasury Secretary that the Biden administration hires, right, need to be really smart people that speak with a Staten Island accent.
Well,
right?
Works
how you go, it's British people, they say dumb things, but they sound so smart because of their accent. Well, how about some smart people that sound dumb because, they sound like where I grew up.
I guess that's a way to approach it.
Let's just do that.
Yeah, sure. Well, it can work. And sometimes it's just the accent will do the thing.
Right. Everybody knows New Yorkers are like street people because the way they talk. Right? We all talk like this. We all talk like this. So what's the problem here? We all talk like this. You talk like that from New Jersey, okay? You guys get out there and start spreading the economic message. And don't sound like you're for some, pointy-headed ivory tower college intellectual, right?
I guess that would work.
Sound like a guy from the street who says the same damn stuff.
Yeah. Give it a try. Why not? It's good messaging, but there have been a number of people that say, the right economic message carried in a Southern accent and explained in terminology that makes sense to a different part of the country would be very wise.
That would be
they're underfunded people as well.
That would be fine. I guess the point I'm making is I would never go and say that people who sound like they're from the South sound dumb, but being a native New Yorker, I'm perfectly happy to say people from New York can really sound dumb
right.
sometimes.
What I'm doing is
listen
saying,
to us.
The door is open if you are Southern to come on and tell us how dumb you sound.
I can't say that. You can say that. I can't say that.
I'm not sure exactly where I'm going, but no, just speaking the local dialect, that's not a new lesson at all. Yeah. Now, I guess there's some phenomenon. Will people across the country think that New York street accents sound dumb enough for them to listen to? Like, they're not from my area, but they sure sound dumb, and I'm dumb too, so I'm going to listen. I don't know whether that will work. It's hard to tell because they're dumb.
So Damone Linker, to finish this thought here, says, I think Dems are wildly underestimating the intensity of anger college loan cancellation is going to provoke. Those with college debt will be thrilled, but lots and lots of people who didn't go to college or who work to pay off their debt's going to be bad. And Will Bunch, who's as progressive as they come, says, I don't 100% agree here, but a lot of debt held by people of color, first generation to attend college, etc. But I do think current progressive ideas could exacerbate the college, non-college fault line in America. Opportunities have to be expanded to the half now shut out or left behind. And that's really the point.
Yeah. And there are good ways of doing that, I'm sure.
Right? And this is the article I was referring to from NBC.
Part.
It's in the pundit roundup. Both of those things are in the pundit roundup.
Okay.
Joe's a blue-collar guy. After years of declining power, union leaders look to Biden. Organized labor believes that as a friend coming to the White House, here's what's on the agenda. And they're asking Richard Trumka, president of the AFL-CIO. Mm-hmm. And again, difference between how leadership votes and how rank and file vote. So we have to be cognizant of that. But, labor leaders are in a position to help talk to us about what rank and file need.
Yeah, okay.
I like unions. Always have.
All right. Let's
Right?
ask.
This is from Isaac Chutner. There have been a lot of euphemisms used over the last 4 years to explain why voters support Trump, but this in today's Washington Post might be my favorite. Markay Harlan, and every time I read her name, I'm thinking her first name is Malarkey. Markay Harlan has been on the Trump train from the start, and she's not getting off now. The 70-year-old real estate developer from suburban Pittsburgh revels in President Trump's body blows to the status quo.
Okay.
Right? Body blows to the status quo.
Yeah.
Right? Is that a nice way of saying I hate all of you people and I want to stick it in your eye?
The euphemisms. Yes. Sure. Well.
So if Trump says the election was rigged, she's on board.
All right.
And that's about a story that discusses, the fact that Trump has been planning on this rigged election for a year. And last thing, as I see that we're at 9:57, I thought it was finished 15 minutes ago, but I guess not.
I like it.
A guy I really don't like very much, Kevin Williamson, wrote in the Washington Post, Trumpism expanded the GOP tent. Don't expect Republicans to abandon it now. He put his finger on a lot of what this populism is all about. And with the subtitle here, the subheader, the politics of blaming someone else appeals to more than just white America.
Okay.
And that's really what it's all about. This isn't going good. It's you people in New York.
Oh.
I don't like the way things are developing in my small town in Ohio where manufacturing is leaving the country. It's California's fault. It's New York's fault. It's Democrats' fault. It's everybody else's. That's why when Trump come and said he'd save Carrier, I'm all in.
Yeah. By the way, didn't. But okay. I can see why you get excited about it. That's true. All right. Well,
that's a classic retweet is not endorsement, but at least he was able to, in a few short words, summarize what's going on here.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Donald Trump, and my people blame someone else. Vote for me.
Seems to have worked. All right, we're going to take our break and see you Wednesday. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. Greg has finished. He realized, I'm hungry. I'm going to go eat some breakfast, get on with my day. So, all right, that leaves us on our own for another hour or so. I'm sure there are some other stories. I'm pretty sure I saw a whole newspaper full of things earlier today. The one thing we didn't make mention of is the Washington Post in an editorial coming out in favor of the abolition of the Electoral College. And that's helpful. In a relatively practical approach to the editorial, in that, don't get too excited. It's not a practical approach like, well, here's how we could actually execute that. It's more along the lines of, we don't actually see a path to getting it done, say, by a constitutional amendment, which it would require to totally abolish it, to actually erase it from the books. And they don't address the multi-state compact in here, and it's not really necessary to do. This is more of a theoretical thing. So would you like to hear about that, or had you not seen it? It goes this way from the editorial board, mentioning that our columnist Mark A. Thiessen, is that how he pronounces his name? I don't know. Noted last week that President Trump had come very close to winning re-election. And this is kind of an interesting point, another way of parsing the election. And it's true. I guess, I don't really know. It sounds truthy. How about that? A flip of just some 73,700 votes in those three states, that would be Arizona, Pennsylvania, and Georgia this time, as opposed to the 77 to 80,000 votes that would have had to have flipped in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania last time. We have a similar situation here. 73,000 votes flip in Arizona, Pennsylvania, and Georgia, and Trump would be making plans for a second term, which he is anyway, so I guess it doesn't really matter. And we would all be talking about a red wave, he wrote, and that's likely true, right? When you engineer a win, everybody talks about what a genius you are, even if it's that close to being a total defeat. Mr. Thiessen's point was that Mr. Trump's near miss makes him a viable candidate in 2024, which is a different point entirely, but still we can glide past that and get to a different point. We draw a different lesson, they say, and here's where they do it. It is alarming that a candidate came so close to winning while polling more than 5 million fewer votes, and maybe even more, than his opponent nationwide. The Electoral College, whatever virtues it may have had for the Founding Fathers, is no longer tenable for American democracy. We write this, here they say, with full awareness of the challenges of adopting a new system, with respect for many of the people who continue to argue against a switch, and with awareness that any change may have unintended consequences. And that's a good point. We need to start considering some of that. Right now, our presidential elections are conducted by 51 separate authorities, each with its own rules on registration, mail-in balloting, and more. And that's true. And if you go to a national popular vote system, you give rise, I think, to a lot of constitutional claims, and better framed constitutional claims than those claims that have cited the same sources in the past, like in Bush v. Gore and what was happening in Florida and inside of a single state. Much easier to see on a national scale, equal protection and similar concepts, right? That if votes in one state can be cast a certain way and votes in another state can't be cast that way, or counting is done this way or that way in various states or even within a state, it makes it difficult to argue that people in all parts of the country are having their votes be weighted, not weighted equally, but given equal weight when it comes to counting them and how to count them. So again, as they put it here, right now, our presidential elections conducted by 51 separate authorities, each with its own rules on registration, mail-in balloting, and more. Each state counts its own ballots, and each decides when recounts are needed. We could probably standardize something as simple as that. All of that would have to change if the president were chosen based on the national vote count. Additionally, Electoral College math induces candidates to pay attention to voters in some small states who might otherwise be ignored. I've never really bought that argument, but that's one of the ones that's hung around maybe since the framing. I don't know whether it actually originated with the framers or is just something that people came up with in latter days, but it's never really, I understand the claim, but I just don't see it happening that way. I mean, to me, well, they'll pay attention to smaller states. No, they won't. They'll pay attention. To me, it argues the opposite, that they'll be in Texas and California and New York and Florida and a few other select states and just say, I'll just stitch together an electoral vote win and abandon the smaller places. I'm not certain why anybody believes the opposite, but I've never heard it put persuasively, I guess. But I don't want to. I'd rather talk about what we can do about moving away from the Electoral College. But, as they point out here in their editorial, why should Iowa's, let's say, biofuel lobby get more of a hearing than, say, California's artichoke lobby? Artichokes taste much better than the biofuel. Small states already have disproportionate clout in our government because of the Senate, in which Wyoming's fewer than 600,000 residents have as much representation as California's 39.5 million. We see no particular reason voters in purple states, such as Wisconsin, should be valued more than voters in red states, such as Mississippi, or blue states, such as Washington. There are worries that direct election might encourage regionalism or, and this is a serious consideration, third parties at the extremes of political discourse. I mean, third parties, I guess, aren't so much the problem as the extremes of political discourse, but they will tend to go hand in hand so long as our two main parties occupy such a wide swath of the middle, I suppose. Any switch to a national system would rightly trigger debates over runoffs or rank choice voting to ensure majority rule. And you'd think you'd have to perhaps consider that in order to keep things more or less stable. And we recognize that the constitutional amendment that would be required, of course, to abolish the Electoral College isn't about to happen because of the mechanics of it and finding a 2/3 majority and ratified by all the states, and there'll be states that resist this. But it's time to get serious about a change, some change, any kind of change, I guess. Mr. Trump became president in 2016 despite earning 3 million fewer votes than Democratic nominee Hillary Clinton. Now he has come close to winning re-election despite losing the popular vote by a far greater margin. Though by the time all the votes are counted, it won't be quite as close as when Mr. Thiessen wrote. Mr. Trump is now trailing in Arizona, Georgia, and Pennsylvania by more than 90,000 votes, so there is at least that. We believe that Mr. Trump's election was a sad event for the nation. It's just sad. Okay, that's it. His re-election would have been a calamity. We hope Mr. Thiessen is wrong about 2024, but we would be making this argument no matter which party seemed likely to benefit. If Democratic nominee John F. Kerry hadn't lost Ohio by just 120,000 votes in 2004, he would have won an electoral college victory despite trailing President George W. Bush by 3 million votes in the national count. That would have been a problem too. Americans are not going to be satisfied with leaders who have been rejected by a majority of voters, and they're right not to be. It's time to let the majority rule. All right, no fantastic insights necessarily in the editorial. Just thought I would share it with you and, throw it out there as a possibility. They've left it to others, I guess, to discuss the mechanics of either how to accomplish it or how to count the votes or what exactly it would mean. Could you just do simple majority things? How do you handle people who run as spoilers for one or another of the two major party candidates? Would the two major parties still be the only major parties going, or would we form other ones? Should we have ranked choice voting? Does that work very well? I don't know. Asparagus Zucchini here, observing for us, or rather wondering, while we're getting rid of the Electoral College, maybe get rid of states too. I mean, I don't know how popular an idea that's going to be. Of course, it creates a branding problem for us here in the United States as well. But we've dealt with worse, I guess. I don't know whether that's in the offing. I don't know if anybody actually proposing that. But we could certainly we could think about different representational schemes in Congress. You don't need to have states. You can just divide up into different jurisdictions for the purpose of both selecting your representation in Congress and for vote counting. It doesn't have to be the case that Nebraska counts all the votes in this area, and no other entity could possibly be invented that would come up with a way of counting the votes, because we have a different entity counting those votes now. The state of Nebraska is responsible for reporting its results, but it's only able to do so with the cooperation of the various counties and other political subdivisions that count the votes within its jurisdiction and then report up the chain. You could just have them report to a different chain is all. Or states with different shapes, if you thought that made a difference for you. Anyway, lots to ponder about that, but definitely worth noting when the Washington Post gets on board with something like that. All right, let's see. Other fun news worth sharing. Let's see. Some of these are the notes that I put away from Greg's discussion of things. Let's see. Here's an interesting one too. Where did I pick this one up from? You have to go through ABC News. Yes, this was kind of a fun and interesting item. This one shared with me earlier this morning by Rebecca Romans, who sent us this one, Lambs and Beds, and just sent along with her own laughter at the situation, and wondering how many of these white shoe law firms that are out there are going to trash their reputations taking on these weak sauce cases for orange foolishness. She retweeting Terry Moran's tweet touting this piece. Terry Moran not involved, I guess, in the byline on this piece. It's Matthew Mosk, Olivia Rubin, and Alex, what is that? Is that really? I'm going to get closer to the screen on that one. They use really small type here on ABC. Nah, that's what it says. Hosenball. Alex Hosenball. And I was like, first of all, is it Hosenhall? I better go and check that. But Hosenball, that's a new one for me. Okay. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, but it's, an Anglo surname, so I don't know. Anyway, Terry, in retweeting this, I guess, pulled a couple of quotes from a couple of judges who have faced these suits. And so his is a great way of long story shorting this one. But let me see it doesn't look like a terrifically long piece. Let's run through it. Judges appear increasingly frustrated with Trump's legal claims about 2020 election. Come on now, one judge said after hearing a Trump team claim. That's the subheader. That's about the weakest pull for a subheader I've heard in a long time. Come on now, said one judge. Really? And there are much better quotes pulled out by Terry Moran here, although come on now is one of them. But it's only part of that quote. Anyway, the recent scene in Clark County, Nevada, has become increasingly common in courthouses around the country as President Donald Trump continues to push thinly supported allegations of election misconduct and fraud. When Republican lawyers in Nevada complained their observers were not close enough, if they could not hear everything poll workers were saying, U.S. District Judge Andrew Gordon pushed back. At what point does this get ridiculous? The exasperated judge, an appointee of President Barack Obama, asked before ruling against the Republicans. In court hearings and opinions around the country, judges are voicing similar frustrations with the Trump campaign's legal filings to a degree rarely seen in venues where political rhetoric is generally unwelcome, experts and courthouse veterans said. Judge after judge after judge has asked, in essence, where is the beef? They get rid of the contraction in this. Where is the beef? Said Carl Racine, the Attorney General for the District of Columbia, and a frequent Trump critic, in a call with reporters on Friday. We have seen numerous instances where affidavits have been filed only to be immediately pulled back once tested in state and federal court, said Racine, whose own lawsuit against Trump in connection with the president's Washington, D.C. hotel is on hold pending appeal. I would not be surprised if these baseless allegations continue. Judges will begin to threaten and indeed issue sanctions. And it would be about time for that. The Trump campaign and its supporters have filed at least 18 cases in battleground states targeted because the president trailed Democrat Joe Biden by a comparatively narrow margin. With rare exceptions, the Trump campaign has been losing in court, regardless of whether the judges were appointed by Democratic or Republican presidents. The filings have only garnered 2 favorable rulings to date. I didn't even know about the second one until just now, and numerous denials and dismissals. Trump campaign communications director Tim Murtaugh told ABC News that the president owes it to the 73 million people who voted for him to ensure that the election was fair and secure. And he also owes it to everyone who voted for Joe Biden. Oh, thanks. Don't worry about it. I'll let you off the hook on this debt. Every American deserves the peace of mind that our elections are sound. Nevertheless, several of those defeats have been punctuated by sharply worded rebukes from judges from both political parties, even before the election. Judges were voicing skepticism about the Trump claims that the election would be undermined by fraud, something the president asserted frequently on social media and at political rallies, but rarely actually documented. Never, really, is the way you would put that. Never documented. Central to some of the plaintiffs' claims is the contention that the upcoming election, both nationally and in Montana, will fall prey to widespread voter fraud, said U.S. District Judge Dana L. Christensen in Helena. I guess that explains the reference to Montana. This judge, a Barack Obama appointee, and this said in late September in ruling against the Trump campaign filing to halt mail-in voting in the state. The evidence suggests, however, that this allegation, specifically in Montana, is a fiction. As the legal effort grew following the election, judges appeared to grow increasingly agitated by the claims. In Michigan, Judge Cynthia Stevens questioned attorneys about a sworn affidavit that Republican attorneys had gathered in which a witness said they were told about mishandling of ballots. What I have at best here is a hearsay affidavit, said Stevens. Remember when they were all concerned about hearsay during the impeachment? Anyway, Stevens, appointed by then Governor Jennifer Granholm, a Democrat. If there is something in that affidavit that would indicate that the witness observed activity, that would be a deprivation of the rights of poll watchers. Well, then I want you to please focus my attention on that. I heard somebody else say something. Tell me why that's not hearsay. Come on now. Well, there's the come on now. And all the real juicy stuff comes before. I don't know why they use that as the pull quote. In Pennsylvania, Trump's lawyers had suggested their poll observers had been shut out of the locations where ballots were being counted. So when the lawyers acknowledged that the observers had in fact been permitted within 15 feet of the poll workers, U.S. District Judge Paul Diamond, appointed by then-President George W. Bush, appeared baffled. I'm sorry, then what's your problem? Diamond chirped. I wouldn't have guessed that they would use that, but chirped. In a federal case meant to disqualify cured ballots, Judge Timothy Savage, another Bush appointee, questioned the very premise of the Republican attorney's arguments. I don't understand how the integrity of the election was affected, Savage said during a November 4th hearing. One lawyer representing Republican poll challengers in Michigan argued that coronavirus restrictions meant they were positioned as far as 20 feet back, to the point where you can't see anything. Judge Timothy M. Kenney took umbrage. Where's the facts about that? On Friday, Kenney, who has served on the state court for more than 24 years, rejected the request to block the certification of results and order an independent audit. He did not mince words, describing the GOP poll watchers' interpretation of events inside the Detroit counting facility at the TFC Center as incorrect and not credible. By the way, can you just bring binoculars if you're 20 feet away? I mean, I think so, right? You just forgot. And whose fault is that? I don't know. Anyway, plaintiffs rely on numerous affidavits from election challengers who paint a picture of sinister, fraudulent activities occurring both openly in the TCF Center and under the cloak of darkness, Kenney wrote, noting that those claims were decidedly contradicted by an elections expert put forth by the defense. David Kallman, the attorney for the poll challengers, told ABC News he would be appealing the ruling Monday. We disagreed totally with what the judge said, Kallman said. When Montgomery County, Pennsylvania, Judge Richard P. Haas grilled Trump campaign lawyer Jonathan Goldstein at a court hearing last week, he wanted to know the basis for the Trump claims of fraud. I'm asking you a specific question, and I am looking for a specific answer. Are you claiming that there is any fraud in connection with these 592 disputed ballots? Said Haas, a Democrat. To my knowledge, at present, no, Goldstein replied. Okay, so that kind of solves it, right? Wendy Weiser, director of the Bipartisan Law and Public Policy Institute at the Brennan Center for Justice, has been tracking the judge's comments and rulings, which she said were unusual for their pointed tone. It is unusual for judges to be chastising litigants. Not really. Weiser said, but the lack of evidence in these cases is unusual. For the judges to be speaking this way, the gaps need to be fairly significant. On Friday, after one of the leading firms handling the Trump campaign's legal efforts in Pennsylvania filed papers to withdraw from the case, the president's longtime personal lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, said he would be taking the lead in the fight. A few days earlier, Giuliani had made it clear he had no intention of backing down. I think we have enough to challenge, it's Rudy Giuliani. I think we have enough to challenge Pennsylvania. All right, that's not really great, Rudy Giuliani, but it's a caricature, as Greg would say it. The Pennsylvania election was a disaster, Giuliani said on Fox News. We have people that observe people being pushed out of the polling place. We have people who were suggested we have people who were suggested to vote. Were suggested to vote the other way and shown how to do it. I'm giving you the big picture, but none of the evidence. Weiser said those types of claims remain unsupported. That's the problem. And if Trump lawyers continue to try and bring them into court cases, she expects to see more of the pointed rulings. You are required to have some basis for believing your claims to be true. It has to have some basis in fact, not just wild speculation, Weiser said, and the bar isn't even that high. To not meet it is very unusual and inappropriate. So, interesting new twist on things here. Is there a truck in the house? What's going on? Okay. The window's open. All right. This truck has come by and opened the window so that they could make more noise. Well, it's the garbage truck. And if we had Abby here, she'd be going wild. But we don't. So, I guess we're lucky in that sense. All right. So judges everywhere are getting increasingly frustrated. It's time for them to take out their frustration on some of these lawyers and sanction them. And that might perhaps put a cap on some of the dumbest stuff that is getting filed. But you never know. But well worth considering. Let's see. Other stories from around the country. Here's more action from federal judges. Let's see. I got two takes on the same story. Chad Wolf, who is not the acting head of the Department of Homeland Security, as we ascertained a long time ago here on the show, and other people have speculated for even longer. More federal judges agree that he's not, and are sort of kind of taking some action, and so that's good. Let's give you the what do we say? The 50,000 foot view. Would the 50,000 foot view of this be coming from NBC News, which is kind of glossing over the whole thing, or from Lawfare, where they're taking it seems like a weedier view, but taking in a wider angle lens, I guess, on these things. I don't know. We'll take a look and we'll compare the two. How about that? Although we won't be able to do it all before the break. Federal judge rules acting DHS head, he's not even that, Chad Wolf, unlawfully appointed, and does something about it. In this case, invalidates a DACA suspension issued by Wolf. Doesn't kick him out of the office, which is what really needs to happen. Let's take a quick look at this one. Dennis Romero wrote up for NBC News. A federal judge in New York City, said on Saturday that Chad Wolf has not been acting lawfully as the chief of Homeland Security, and that as such, his suspension of protections for a class of migrants brought to the United States illegally as children is invalid. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled in June that the Trump administration wrongly tried to shut down protections under the Obama-era legislation known as DACA, or Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. On July 28th, Wolf nonetheless suspended DACA pending review. This is how long it takes to get things through the courts. It's now November. Homeland Security did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Judge Nicholas Garaufis, I'm going to guess is the pronunciation here, said court conferences would be held to work out the details of his ruling. He concluded Wolf was not lawfully serving as acting Secretary of Homeland Security under the Homeland Security Act when he issued the Wolf memorandum that suspended DACA. Karen Tumlin, a lawyer in the case and director of the Los Angeles-based Justice Action Center, said the ruling means the effort in the Wolf memo to gut the DACA program is overturned. She said the ruling applies to more than 1 million people, including more recent applicants and those seeking 2-year renewals for protection under DACA. This is a really hopeful day for a lot of young people across the country, Tumlin said. Although President Donald Trump formally nominated Wolf for the job in the summer, Wolf has yet to get a full vote in the Senate, keeping his role as acting. For now, anyway. Garaufis cited the Government Accountability Office, which wrote in a report to Congress in August that Wolf was the beneficiary of an invalid order of succession. And, we remember that. We'll get some more details about this from the Lawfare folks afterwards, I think. I'll have to take a look and see if it won't occupy the whole last segment. But the judge described an illegitimate shuffling of leadership chairs at the Department of Homeland Security, the agency responsible for immigration enforcement, for the predicament of Wolf's leadership and that of his predecessor, Kevin McCleenan. Based on the plain text of the operative order of succession, Garaufis wrote in the Saturday ruling, Neither Mr. McLennan nor, in turn, Mr. Wolf possessed statutory authority to serve as acting secretary. Therefore, the Wolf Memorandum was not an exercise of legal authority. The ruling is part of an ongoing case with DACA recipient Martin Jonathan Batalla Vidal, serving as the lead plaintiff in a 6-plaintiff case against Wolf and the Department of Homeland Security. The suit initially challenged the state of Texas's attempt to thwart DACA. So how do you like that? All the way from Texas up to New York City. We'll see if we can explain it after this. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, and I've learned that I either need to update these announcements more often or stop saying that the announcements are brand new. What's not new is that this message, too, is a call for your support in keeping the Kagro in the Morning show on the air. My thanks go out to all of you who do support the show through your donations. The stats say that Kagro in the Morning fans download our program about 2,000 times each weekday, but our donors make up only about 8% of our daily listeners. Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple to make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. If we're helping keep you sane during the Trump era, consider what that's worth. $1 a day? 50 cents? One thin dime? We do about 20 shows a month, so pick a number, do the math, and head to patreon.com/KagroX to let us know. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. Okay, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning show here on Netroots Radio. Different angle being offered here, and it wasn't lawfare, as it turns out. I was fooled into thinking that by the glance I took on the way past it to the NBC News article. It is Law and Crime, lawandcrime.com, about which I don't think I know a great deal. It's I don't even know what this is. It says Law and Crime. It's got a banner up at the top. Law and Crime, a Dan Abrams production, which makes it sound either like a television show, maybe a game show even. A Dan Abrams production makes it sound like the end of Price is Right, right? Anyway, do we know who Dan Abrams is across the, by the way here? But the piece is written by Jerry Lamb, who I guess is a Dan Abrams employee. I don't know exactly what this is. We'll take a look at offline at exactly what this is. But I glanced at this over the weekend as I parked it in pocket for discussion. It looked like a very interesting, differently angled look at what was going on with Chad Wolf here. And we've been over this a little bit, but it's been a while since we talked about it, and so the details are not fresh in my mind. But as I recall, they, sort of manipulated the appointments and a memorandum purporting to somehow reshuffle the order of succession in contravention to an already existing statute that outlined how authority would devolve in the Department of Homeland Security. So let me take a look at their summary of things here. Attorneys at the Department of Homeland Security on Friday, before the ruling came down on Saturday, notified this federal judge that a previous claim, I guess this is how they ended up getting the ruling to go against them. This is the important part. A previous claim relied upon to justify the controversial and likely, now definitely, unlawful appointment of Chad Wolf as acting secretary. Not only, of course, was the judge right that he's not acting secretary and it was an unlawful appointment, but this is the interesting. A claim that the lawyers previously relied upon to justify this appointment was not true. This is interesting all by itself. Wolf took over the department's top job after a previous acting secretary, Kevin McLennan, resigned in November of 2019. But according to the nonpartisan Government Accountability Office, Wolf was not the correct official in the line of succession at DHS to assume the role. While Wolf and DHS have vehemently disputed that theory, which is actually true, in a lawsuit filed by several states challenging Wolf's authority, the banner ads have changed and everything has moved now. All right. Let's see. Okay. Right. While Wolf and DHS have vehemently disputed that theory, in a lawsuit filed by several states challenging Wolf's authority, the department recently argued that the point is moot. not the point. But the point, it's a different thing. The point is moot because Wolf was rightfully appointed to the position in September 2020. You see, when the president actually nominated him to be DHS Secretary, but the Senate hasn't gotten around to that yet. But they claim that that nomination cures the defect, and apparently not. The department claimed that after Wolf was officially nominated by Trump to serve as DHS Secretary on September 10th, Peter Gaynor, and this is a great story. Now it's coming back to me. It's a Trump and paperwork story, one of my favorites here. So after the nomination on September 10th, Peter Gaynor, the head of the Federal Emergency Management Agency, became the designated acting DHS Secretary under the Federal Vacancy Reform Act, or FVRA. And the Vacancy Reform Act becomes important when we're talking about filling vacancies in executive departments, and when we're worried about, say, for instance, we'll get to this story next, perhaps. This will be our segue, about Mitch McConnell and Senate Republicans, if they're able to do this, and if we don't win the 2 seats in Georgia, and maybe sometime before we're able to prevent this from happening, just blocking all cabinet level or any executive appointments that they feel like blocking. I don't know if they'll feel like blocking all of them, but they could certainly create a lot of chaos. The Federal Vacancy Reform Act offers a possible path out of this. We'll discuss that later on. But here you go. Again, so the DHS says Wolf was officially nominated to serve as DHS Secretary, and that after that happened, the acting DHS Secretary under Federal Vacancy Reform Act, I guess, devolves to the head of FEMA, Peter Gaynor. Now, that's kind of confusing, but according to an October 7th memo submitted by DHS in the Eastern District of New York, after Gaynor became acting secretary, he exercised his authority as acting secretary to designate a new order of succession under which Wolf, as the Senate confirmed undersecretary, he was once confirmed as undersecretary for strategy, policy, and plans, would have immediately begun serving as acting DHS secretary. That's an interesting move, that the new acting DHS secretary, the guy who's the head of FEMA, issues a new memo that says, actually, this from now on will go to, not only from now on, but retroactively applying to Chad Wolf, that the Undersecretary for Strategy, Policy, and Plans becomes acting DHS Secretary. Once the Gaynor order was executed, it superseded any authority Mr. Gaynor may have had under the Federal Vacancies Reform Act and confirmed my authority, Wolf says, to continue to serve as acting secretary. This is according to the memo Wolf wrote on September 17th. Thus, in addition to the authority I possess pursuant to the November 8th, 2019 order of succession effectuated by former acting Secretary McCleenan, the Gaynor order alternatively removes any doubt that I am currently serving as the acting secretary. But guess what? DHS told the court on Friday that Gaynor may have issued the latest succession order before President Trump officially submitted Wolf's name to the Senate for consideration as DHS secretary, calling the blunder an, quote, inadvertent factual inaccuracy. That's a good one. Well, it was an inadvertent factual inaccuracy, Your Honor. Was it incorrect, though? Yes. But you weren't lying. No, we weren't lying. We were just inadvertently factually inaccurate about what we told you. But do you see what's happening here? It's actually not that easy to parse out of this, but I guess Wolf says that the FEMA guy who under the Vacancies Act would ordinarily become acting DHS secretary, that the first thing he did was reorganize the order of succession such that, I guess, Wolf becomes the preferred acting secretary, not him, the FEMA guy, because of various circumstances, one of which is that his name has now been submitted to the Senate for consideration as permanent DHS secretary, except his name hadn't been sent. Now, it was probably President Trump's intention to send that nomination, but because Trump sucks at paperwork, and you should always check Trump's paperwork and never assume anything. I've nominated. In fact, I already did it. I nominated Chad Wolf for DHS secretary. And you always say to him, well, that as may be, but show me the paperwork so I can be sure of it. Show me the nomination documentation. And the answer is we don't have it. Normally, I guess all by itself, that doesn't matter a great deal. We'll produce it. We're going to put it out in about an hour. And because we're not idiots, we're not going to have him running around trying to pretend he's DHS secretary before we even nominate him. It's not that imperative that he start doing dumb stuff. We can wait an hour. Everything normally is okay. But this administration, no. They jump right in and do dumb stuff immediately because they're just so excited and they don't really know how government works. I just want to hurt people and I want to get started sooner rather than later. Could you wait an hour for me to fill out this paper? No, I can't. And besides which, I thought the whole point of telling everybody that I was nominated was that the paper was already written. Well, we're lazy and stupid. Hasn't anybody told you? No, I did not know that. Okay, well, now you're aware. And you're also not acting secretary. Late yesterday evening, that would have been Thursday, November 12th of this year, the Department of Homeland Security conveyed to the Department of Justice that it had learned that Mr. Gaynor's September 10th, 2020 succession order may have been signed approximately 1 hour before Mr. Wolf's nomination was formally submitted to the Senate, said the letter to U.S. District Judge Nicholas Garaufis. We tried his name last time, right? The counsel for defendants do not yet know the precise timing of events, and the Department of Justice counsel are working expeditiously with DHS to verify the exact timing. But it now appears likely, based on the facts known to counsel for defendants at this time, that Mr. Gaynor's succession order was signed on September 10th, 2020, but before Mr. Wolf's nomination for the office of Secretary of Homeland Security was submitted to the Senate later that day, which, if true, would be inconsistent with counsel for the defendants' prior factual understanding and with the most natural reading of some of the language in defendants' reply brief. If true, that would mean that Mr. Gaynor's order empowering Wolf was not valid, as Gaynor wasn't authorized to sign off on a new line of succession at DHS. Isn't that amazing? So DHS has put it all together in a not that lengthy letter to the judge explaining all of it. I don't think we benefit that much by reading the letter, but it's there in case you want to on your own. And, of course, you'll have access to it in the roundup. Links to this lawandcrime.com article. Very interesting. Just another Trump and paperwork man example of how he can F things up royally by not paying attention to the details of governance. But we already knew that. You want this guy administering the distribution of a vaccine that's going to require some precision and attention to detail? No, you do not. All right, let's see. I mentioned some other possibilities about that would have to do with the succession, the not presidential succession, but Vacancies Reform Act. I'll read you this piece from Slate, in which Jeff Hauser and David Siegel put together their take on how effective McConnell can be in preventing a cabinet from being assembled, cabinet and top executive department positions. I'm not certain I agree with it 100%, and I'm not certain it takes into consideration current conditions with respect to the efficacy of recess appointments. We had a recent case not that long ago. What was it? Noel Canning case that seemed to call into question just how easy it would be to make recess appointments. They may have factored it in discussing what constitutes a recess, but I'm not 100% sure. But I'll give you their take. It does offer some possibilities for getting around roadblocks put up by Mitch McConnell, especially on things that they're willing to fight for, like cabinet positions. In 2016, Donald Trump won, as you know, 3 million fewer votes than his opponent and was seen by a great deal of voters as not merely unlikable, but actively dangerous and horrifying. Yet mediocre turnout and an electoral college inside straight handed Trump the presidency. Trump proposed to the Senate a cabinet built in his own image, inexperienced, unqualified, ideologically extreme, and aligned with the wants of corporate elites. Hence, Energy Secretary Rick Perry, who literally didn't understand his department's agenda and opposed its very existence, as a matter of fact. Education Secretary Betsy DeVos, a lifelong opponent of public education with no government experience. Housing and Urban Development Secretary Ben Carson, an anti-public housing surgeon. On and on it went. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, like his whole caucus, tied his political future to Trump and confirmed this cabinet of unqualified, not qualified, but they were that too, ideologues post haste. Fancy writing. In 2020, campaigning through unprecedented crises and against an opposition party dead set on disenfranchising as many Americans as possible, Joe Biden still managed to win both the presidency and the largest popular vote mandate in American history. But barring a difficult clean sweep in a pair of Georgia Senate runoff elections, Republicans have already signaled that McConnell thinks he will wield veto power over Biden's cabinet nominees. McConnell has done more than any human being in recent history, and we're not sure he is one, but certainly more than any turtle in recent history, to destroy Senate bipartisanship entirely, transforming American politics into a naked war for power. Don't say Mitch McConnell naked. Most infamously, McConnell prevented Barack Obama's final Supreme Court nominee, Merrick Garland, from even receiving a confirmation hearing, much less a vote, in 2016, calling it improper to do so in an election year. He subsequently jammed Amy Coney Barrett onto the court mere weeks before the 2020 election. Imagine the Garland fiasco, but for a full 15 cabinet secretaries, plus more than 1,000 additional Senate-confirmed appointees. This is what Biden could be up against merely to build a functioning executive branch. In McConnell, Biden likely faces an opponent ideologically hell-bent on sabotaging any government led by someone with a D next to their name. McConnell has had ample opportunity to address COVID-19, its accompanying recession, climate change, and other crises facing the country. His inaction speaks for itself. Biden can, though, simply refuse to play McConnell's game if he wants to. We'll see about that. In contrast to Supreme Court vacancies, there are two separate alternative strategies for filling out the executive branch without making the leader of the wildly undemocratic Senate a functional co-president. They are the Vacancies Act and the Recess Appointment Clause of the U.S. Constitution. The Vacancies Act, of course, used frequently by presidents of both parties to ensure that the president actually gets to execute the duties of the office to which he was elected. Trump made almost a sport of using the act to appoint acting officials, including two of the current cabinet. It allows a new president to choose from two groups of people to serve as acting secretaries, either any Senate-confirmed official, including dozens of sitting Democrats serving as commissioners at multi-member agencies. I hadn't really considered them as a pool to draw from, mostly because they weren't, most of them, not particularly interested in the greater commitment of actual, day job positions in the executive branch, but interested in these smaller roles as commissioners at multi-member agencies. And yet to be seen whether any court will say, well, they are Senate confirmed, but do we really, the confirmation process is much different. Generally speaking, for these less important positions, they just gloss over it and say, sure, we'll put them on there. But, the Senate has the opportunity to vet all of them thoroughly if they want to. And there is some vetting going on, but not a hearings process, but that's your choice. If you chose not to waste time with a hearing for somebody to be on the St. Lawrence Seaway Commission, that's your problem, not ours. They're Senate confirmed, and that counts. Some judges might say. Others would say, what I want is completely different, and so therefore F the law, and this is what we'll do. So that's a good point. There's a pool of people sitting in multi-member agencies. Also, any senior civil servant who has served in that agency for 90 days and is paid at the GS 15 level or above, the very high levels of government civil service rank. For instance, an acting Health and Human Services Secretary, Anthony Fauci, would sound pretty good, right? The authors pose, pick your word and stick with it. The recess appointment clause, meanwhile, allows presidents to install acting officials while the Senate is in adjournment for at least 10 days. And I think that's the outcome of the Noel Canning thing, that shorter than 10-day recesses aren't effective for recess appointments. It, too, has been used regularly in the recent past. George W. Bush made 179 recess appointments, of course, 99 of which were to full-time positions. Moreover, Biden can force the Senate into recess. Don't forget about proroguing people, I guess. Force the Senate into recess if McConnell attempts to blockade any of his cabinet. Under the Constitution's presidential adjournment clause, if the Senate and House cannot agree on whether or not to adjourn, the president can adjourn Congress for such time as he shall think proper. I imagine he might think 10 days was proper, as a matter of fact. And with an allied Speaker of the House, Biden can instigate an adjournment standoff, resolve it, and make his appointments in the interim. Seems kind of rough around the edges, but worth exploring. Every option is worth exploring at this point. These steps are not preferable to regular order in the Senate. Even the savviest practitioner of the Vacancies Act and recess appointment powers may well end up needing two individuals to fill each job within a 4-year presidential term. And these officials will lack the gravitas accorded by full confirmation. This Plan B is, though, undoubtedly preferable to the alternatives if McConnell tries to play hardball. At the very least, it can be wielded as a stick to try to force him to back down from any attempted obstruction. Without the threat of Plan B, McConnell might concede some confirmations after extracting a few pounds of flesh, but any such appointees would definitionally have been blessed by a man who giddily blocked economy-saving action during the last collapse in service of making Obama a one-term president. In other words, any nominees who would appease McConnell cannot be expected to have Biden or the American people's best interests in mind. I don't know, but okay. They would serve only the Wall Streeters, fossil fuel barons, military contractors, tech monopolists, and other corporate elites, lobbying Biden on their behalf. Maybe, but it's worrisome, to say the least, that he could block anybody he wants. Let's see. Alternatively, Biden could fill these roles with experienced, dedicated civil servants who care about the public interest. He will already have the power to do so on day one of his presidency. Acting officials can ensure that Biden fulfills his mandate and launches a transformative agenda. Then I guess we can talk about what we hope that agenda may be, as these guys take the opportunity to do. An acting Treasury Secretary could oversee CARES Act implementation, perhaps even funding a massive investment program using monies that have already been appropriated by Congress. An acting Secretary of Defense could ensure Defense Production Act appropriations go to provision of personal protective equipment and not jet engine parts, as happened under Trump. They could even lay down the infrastructure for an eventual vaccines distribution. An acting Secretary of Health and Human Services can dispel fears about any unsafe vaccines or an unsafe vaccine approved for the sake of political expediency, as people worried about under the Trump administration, by putting the public health experts front and center again. An acting Secretary of Education can unshackle tens of millions of Americans from student debt peonage. All right. Among other things, we really need to discuss how that mechanically might even work. Anyway, I'm not up to speed on it, but it's not my area. Others who have thought it through, I believe, have a pretty clear idea of how they might execute it. I'd love to hear about it. An acting Attorney General can prosecute corporate corruption, resuscitate civil rights laws, and enforce antitrust laws to help ensure the recovery from the current crisis doesn't enable corporate acquisitions and exacerbate inequality. Then lots of other good things about Joe Biden being elected by 78 million Americans and counting, because they wanted a government that actually reflects their will and addresses their needs. Most immediately, a resolution to the pandemic and accompanying economic woes. And whether or not the Senate cooperates, Biden, they conclude, will have tools to make good on many of his key promises. And I hope it works that way. But it will be most disconcerting if he has to continually prorogue Congress in order to do it. It does pose some serious questions and legitimacy problems. All right, backing up a little bit here in pocket, there are a few other things. Let me give you one or two alternative takes from the weekend, one that I appreciated as people get more and more agitated about the outcome of the election and their analysis of the election and what messages didn't work. This one gets thrown out by that liberal rag Bloomberg, how the police helped Biden get elected. How about that? Demonstrations against police violence seem to have mobilized Democrat voter turnout rather than hurt it, as some feared. Wouldn't you like to hear that alternative explanation? Brenton Mock proposes it again in Bloomberg. Ever since the killing of George Floyd in May set off a wave of protests against police violence across the U.S., there have been grumblings that messages attached to those demonstrations would either derail Democrats' hopes for Election Day, fire up President Trump's base, or both. In reality, says Brenton Mock, pretty much every city in the U.S. that hosted protests, and yes, sometimes riots, true, they didn't host riots, but they happened there, went for President-elect Joe Biden, as did many suburbs, despite concerns by anti-Trump and progressive organizers that they wouldn't be able to mobilize white middle-class voters turned off by the Black Lives Matter and defund the police movements. It appears that, if anything, the protests help Democrats in 2020 rather than hurt them, due to a galvanization of black urban voters. As exit polls and voter data are crunched, one of the major narratives coming out of this election is that black voters helped propel Biden to victory, especially in cities such as Milwaukee, Detroit, Philadelphia, Atlanta, and Pittsburgh, where black voter turnout was critical. Much of the voter turnout among Biden voters was, in general, was influenced by concerns about police and racism. According to the Associated Press VoteCast survey, 68% of Biden voters said these were serious issues. 63% said that the criminal justice system needed a complete overhaul or major changes. And 53% said that protests against police violence were an important factor for this election. All true, I'm sure. Police violence protests led to a heightened awareness and increase in people across the country wanting to be engaged, said NAACP President Derek Johnson. We began to push that it was important for people to move from protest to power at the ballot box, and then we saw a large turnout. I don't think we can provide empirical evidence, but I can say there has been hype energy. I'd rather have the empirical evidence, but hype energy ever since George Floyd, and we saw a lot of that leading up to Election Day in the early vote and on Election Day. The NAACP saw a huge influx of donations, that's some empirical evidence, and financial support after the George Floyd protests. That was also true for many other black-led organizations, particularly in Pittsburgh, where Biden needed a strong showing from black voters to help counter the densely red suburbs and collar counties of western Pennsylvania. The Pittsburgh-based organization One Hood, a black youth activist network that had been doing social justice work since 2006, experienced a surge in funding this summer from philanthropic and corporate donors due to their work in organizing protests against police violence. According to its co-founder, whom we know from Netroots Nation, Jasiri X, grants from companies such as American Eagle Outfitters and Starbucks Corporation this year helped One Hood meet its goal of unseating Trump. It was that organizing around police violence that actually led us to be able to mobilize folks to the polls, he said. We took that energy and those resources that we got, and for the first time we were able to hire people and recruit digital canvassers and put money into things like voting festivals because we had access to those resources. there is much more that I'm going to be unable to get through. I just wanted to at least make you aware of the fact that there was some analysis on the other side, as there almost always is when it comes to quick takes on questions of what exactly happened in the election we just had. And in all the excitement, people use the opportunity to push their own agenda. It's true. And very often there's at least a germ of truth in that agenda, too. And we're more willing to accept that germ of truth when it comes from allies, friends, and fellow coalition members. But the analysis is going to take us a long time to get through, as are the crunching of the numbers. And don't foreclose any of these options. I think it's pretty important to think about, in coalition politics, the motivation of every part of your coalition. It's an important thing. You can't squeeze the balloon on one end and not have the air move to the other. So do be aware of that. All right, stay tuned now for Justice Putnam and the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy coming up next.
From netrootsradio.com, you have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Let's look right to the important stuff here. Residents of a small South Carolina town insisted the injection of a banned chemical in the town's water system, doesn't sound good, is an environmental injustice. It sounds like it. Large parties could trigger fines or jail time during Oregon's coronavirus freeze starting this week.